On February 2026, President Trump signed a directive that, on its surface, appeared to crack open one of the most tightly sealed vaults in American governance. The Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters, PURSUE, established a formal mechanism for the phased declassification of government-held UAP records. 3 release dates were set: May 8th, May 22nd, and June 12, 2026. Each batch would reportedly cover different classification tiers, moving from lower sensitivity material toward more compartmented files. The administration called it unprecedented transparency. But the architecture of PURSUE tells a more complicated story, one defined as much by what it walls off as by what it releases. To understand PURSUE, you have to understand its legal ceiling, Executive Order 13526, signed by President Obama in 2009 and still governing national security classification. EO 13526 grants original classification authority to the President, Vice President, agency heads, and designated officials. It establishes 3 levels, confidential, secret, and top secret, and mandates automatic declassification after 25 years, with critical exceptions. Section 3.3 allows agencies to exempt records that would reveal intelligence sources, methods, military plans, or vulnerabilities to weapons of mass destruction. These exemptions aren't loopholes, they are load-bearing walls. PURSUE operates entirely within this framework. It does not override EO 13526. It does not amend it. It creates a release process bounded by existing classification law, meaning anything touching active intelligence sources or methods can be withheld indefinitely, legally. The 3-batch structure is deliberate. The May 8th release reportedly covers historical records, citing reports, sensor logs, and analysis memos, largely from the pre-2017 era. Much of it already partially surfaced through FOIA litigation and congressional inquiry. May 22nd is said to address material from the ATIP and UAPTF programs, including evaluation frameworks and interagency communication. June 12th, the final batch, is the one drawing the most attention and the most skepticism. It allegedly targets records from within special access programs, the most compartmented tier of classification. But targets is doing heavy lifting in that sentence. Under EO 13526, SAP material requires the personal authorization of the agency head for any declassification action. PURSUE can request, it cannot compel. Alongside the release schedule, the directive established a Science Advisory Council, tasked with evaluating disclosed material and providing independent analysis. On paper, this sounds like a significant step: civilian scientists reviewing government UAP data. The constraint is structural. The Council is authorized to access unclassified and declassified material only. It cannot request, view, or evaluate classified records.
This means the advisory body designed to assess UAP evidence is by design limited to whatever the declassification pipeline produces. It reviews what it is given. It cannot investigate what it suspects exists. The Council provides legitimacy to the output without auditing the input. This distinction matters more than almost anything else in the disclosure conversation. Total disclosure, the release of all government-held UAP information regardless of classification, is not what PURSUE does. It is not what PURSUE was designed to do. What PURSUE implements is rolling declassification, a managed, sequenced process where designated authorities review records against existing exemption criteria and release what clears review. Material that doesn't clear stays classified. There is no appeals mechanism in the directive for records withheld under national security exemptions. There is no independent oversight body empowered to challenge withholding decisions. Rolling declassification, by definition, means someone decides what you see. This is not the first time a president has promised to unseal sensitive records through a structured process. The President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992 mandated full release by October 2017, 25 years later. When that date arrived, thousands of files were withheld on national security grounds. President Trump in his first term authorized partial releases in 2017 and 2018. Biden continued the process. Trump in his current term ordered another release in early 2025. After 3 decades and multiple presidential actions, an estimated 3% of the collection remains partially or fully redacted. The lesson is clear. Mandated release timelines do not guarantee complete disclosure. Agencies retain significant authority to delay, redact, and withhold, and they use it. The most important question about PURSUE isn't what it releases, it's who controls what reaches the release queue. The directive designates the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Defense as the primary classification review authorities. These are the same offices that have historically controlled and restricted UAP-related information. AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, feeds into this chain but does not control it. Congressional efforts under the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023, championed by Senate Majority Leader Schumer, sought to create an independent review board with subpoena power, modeled explicitly on the JFK Records Act. That provision was stripped from the final National Defense Authorization Act. PURSUE fills the space that the Disclosure Act was meant to occupy, but without the enforcement teeth that Congress attempted to provide. Does PURSUE represent genuine transparency? It is more than what existed before. A formal, scheduled release process with presidential authority behind it is not nothing. It creates political expectations. It generates public records.
It forces agencies to engage with the question of what can be released, rather than defaulting to silence. But the architecture is designed to ensure that the most sensitive material, the material that would answer the fundamental questions driving public interest, remains behind classification barriers that PURSUE itself cannot breach. The system releases what the system permits, and the system was built by the same institutions whose secrecy created the demand for disclosure in the first place. The question is whether a controlled flow of information, managed by the agencies that hold it, filtered through legal frameworks that prioritize national security exemptions, and reviewed by a council that can only see what's already been cleared, whether that constitutes transparency or its performance. The May 8th release will be the first test, not of what it contains, but of what's missing. Researchers, journalists, and members of Congress will be watching not just for revelations, but for the shape of the redactions, the scope of the withholdings, and the justifications offered for what remains sealed. PURSUE has created a framework. Whether that framework serves as a doorway or a bottleneck depends entirely on decisions being made right now, behind classification walls, by people whose names we may never know.